and loose.
I'm going to go ahead and hit record so I don't forget to do that. So then we can have lots of little bits of videos for reels and all those things that we love to do. Okay, so if you are tuning in to the Facebook live stream, we have Kirsten Johansen here, and we're going to have an incredible conversation today on how our size and our weight ain't the problem. And we're going to talk more about that once we get the radio show started. So, and I think I mentioned this to you before when we were talking that I usually do a little bit of a drop in just to get connected to the breath and centered and, feeling more myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
One of myself. Let's bring the good self forward. Okay.
30 seconds.
Okay.
All right. Have a good show.
Welcome to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Over the next hour, you will hear raw, honest, and inspiring conversation between Lynsie and her guests, discussing how to thrive, live joyfully, and abundantly in spite of life's challenges. Now, here is your host, Lynsie McKeown.
Hello and welcome to Women Thriving Unapologetically. I'm your host, Lynsie McKeown, and we have yet another incredible show today. I am so blessed to have such incredible women coming onto the show, and every week I'm just astounded by their integrity, their beauty, their strength, their stories. And so I just feel really filled up right now and really honored to be bringing this conversation to the table today, which is around how our weight and our size are not the problems. And so women, I'm going to say that again. Your weight and your size are not the problem. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to dive into what the real underlying issue is that's leading us to feel this suffering in our bodies, and perhaps even anesthetizing ourselves with food and other addictions. But before we dive into this conversation and invite our guests onto the show, we're going to do what we always do. We're going to stop and pause and breathe and get centered and become present to this unique moment in time. So if you are comfortable wherever you are, just take a moment to stop whatever you're doing. Just allow your to-do lists and all the things just to be set aside for a brief moment so that you can connect to your breath. In this moment, if you're comfortable, you can close the eyes. If not, they can be softly downcast, but just bring your awareness to the inflow and the outflow of breath through your nostrils. This sacred stream of breath that has the ability to bring you into this moment, to allow you to feel how you've landed in your body and in this space that the body occupies. And perhaps even placing one hand on your belly and one hand on your heart, connecting to this body of yours that is unique, it is powerful, it is with you from the time that you were born until the time that you die. And so what if this body is not the problem? What if this body is something that actually is beautiful, that can possibly be your best friend because it is with you from the time that you were born until the time that you die? So take 2 more deep breaths in and out through the nose. And just feel yourself soften around this question, what if it's not the problem? And to allow yourself to be open and receptive to the conversation that we are having today. So whenever you're ready, we'll make our way back. And I always feel like I can feel how like my judgment for my body is coming online as my body changes a lot at the age of 51. So I really love to have this conversation today with Kirsten Johansen. And so now Kirsten also has a radio show on Voice America. She's on the Variety Channel, and she is a resilient survivor of many life's challenges. And she talks often about them on her show, which is GTO, Freedom for Humans. And she has a direct experience with addiction, disordered eating, body dysmorphia, metastatic cancer, radiation disease, inflammatory bowel disease, infertility, trauma, anxiety, depression, narcissistic, that's a hard word to say today, narcissistic relationships, divorce, perfectionism, career changes and achievement, and major life changes really to be able to achieve her dreams. So I mean, I think a lot of women can relate to like at least one, if not many of these things. And Kirsten, has this formal education that includes an MBA, BA in sociology and psychology, and just 12 years as a chemical dependency and relapse prevention specialist. But it's like she has the direct experience in her own life, as well as the background to really bring in this level of leadership and supervision and coaching and mentoring that helps women and everyone really to step into owning their power and finding the freedom that can come in this human form. So welcome, Kirsten. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Lynsie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I was telling Kirsten right before the show that, I'm so happy that you're here because this week has been incredibly stressful. And I knew this was going to be such an easy conversation, even though the topics that we're having are complex and can feel, have a weight to them. Like our conversations always feel so empowering and light and easeful. They just flow. So I'm so delighted you're here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. And I was having similar thoughts first, because I do host a show. Coming on as a guest does have a lightness about it. That, hosting, we have a lot of things to think about. And also we're talking about something today that I have a tremendous amount of experience with and that I really love talking about because having suffered as much as I have with this particular issue and coming out the other side in a way that I actually never thought was possible has made me really want to talk about it as much as I can, because I know that it is a source of suffering for so many people in this life.
Yeah, I mean, our culture is so obsessed with body image, our weight, our size, everything about our bodies. And especially if that weight and size is on a woman. And, I believe all women can relate to stepping on a scale and seeing a number that they don't feel comfortable with, or trying to put on a pair of pants that was once their favorite and then it no longer fits perfectly, or they're looking in the mirror and constantly doing these body checks. And, and we believe at some level that if we can lose the weight or we can fit into a particular size or look a particular way, then, it's going to be the solution to a lot of our discomfort that we're having. I mean, I'm even feeling that now. I mean, I've put on weight due to perimenopause and I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel comfortable in my body anymore. But I'd love to hear what your opinion is about, okay, this is not what the problem is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is not what the problem is. And I do want to just note something that's in the kind of in the zeitgeist right now. I was just reading an article that it talked about New York Fashion Week, actually. And so I just kind of want to just speak briefly about this idea of our bodies being a trend of some kind, and, this type of body being in and this type of body being out. And the article was from a model who is a curve model. And she was noting that the previous 2 years, she had gotten a significant amount of work in the runway shows because there were many designers who were being more inclusive and including a range of bodies. And that this year it had dropped significantly. And they gave some percentages. So there was objectively a change in the number of diverse bodies that we're shown, and it coincides with this message that we're getting now that thin is back in. This is extremely harmful, because when we believe these messages that are media-based, that are designed to make us feel less than, to take our power away from us, to take our money away from us, while we throw money at what is not a problem. Our body is not a problem, but we receive these messages that if we don't conform to whatever the current standard is, or whatever we've internalized, depending on how we grew up and who our sort of feminine icons were, and things like that. Mine was Farrah Fawcett, so that will give you an idea of the body type that I idealized my whole life. It just poisons us. It poisons us, and it, we're sort of transitioning, apparently, so they say. Again, this is all made up. This is all made up BS that we do not have to believe, and it's important that we don't believe it, because when we believe it, and when we believe it with our money, and when we believe it by giving away our power, we kind of we support it, because it's a huge industry. So I just kind of wanted to mention that it's upsetting, because, I know what I was going to say, because prior it was tiny waist, big boobs, big butt. This other completely unattainable without surgical and all kinds of cosmetic intervention, or just the exact right genetics. Both of these standards that are being pitched to us as the value standard for how women should look are unattainable, and they're fantasies, and they don't exist.
And I really appreciate you bringing that in, that it's, it's a trend. It's not reality. It's not reality at all. And it's completely unattainable. I mean, even that, the big boobs, the tiny waist, and the big butt, we can think of the Kardashians, for example, but
Yep.
the body types that they have, one, partly due to genetics, but a lot is due to cosmetic surgery. And people forget that. That this is not attainable unless you are, one, starving yourself, or have the money for cosmetic surgery, or just really suffering greatly to try to attain that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so,
I suffered from 10 to 50, 40 years I spent in some form of either disordered eating and dysmorphia, or recovery from disordered eating with raging body dysmorphia, which is kind of an interesting concept. And so I'm quite familiar with, and I've been many different weights, and I'm here to say that sometimes at my smallest was when the self-hate was the loudest. So this idea that if you can make your body look a certain way, or be the size that you think is going to bring you this sense of peace, that you can just relax because now you've made it, you've reached the right size or the right number on the scale or whatever. I reached all those places, and all I found there was more to do, more to work on, more to do, more to address. Well, what about this that's wiggly? Or what about this that's sagging? Or, well, the right number on the scale isn't enough. What about the silly little label in my clothing that if it didn't say the right thing, I cut it out. I cut it out. And guess what? I still remembered. Even though I cut it out, I had in my brain what size that garment was. And then I would attach that to my value.
yeah.
It's awful. It's awful and poisonous, and terrible.
And we've had a guest on the show before to talk about Stasia Savasik, and she's all about the, ignore the sizes, because she'll go out there and buy 10 pairs of pants, buy the same brand, same style, same size, put them on, and they all fit differently. So it's just like not really a true measure of the sizes are not accurate, even if they're the same brand, same style, same, number
They
in the
mean
waistband.
nothing.
It means
No, they mean
nothing.
not. No, they mean
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
They mean nothing.
So what really means something is how do you see yourself when you're looking in the mirror? Would you agree with that, or how you feel, what the
Well,
beliefs are around it?
great. That is a great question. So I have stopped looking in the mirror in that way. I've stopped. So I do not look in the mirror in an evaluative way. I do not look in the mirror to determine whether I look good or bad or right or wrong or to this or to that. So I'm very utilitarian and practical at this point. I look in the mirror when I need to. If I'm going to be on camera or go out in public or, to moisturize my face or whatever, I get dressed and I may take a glance, but I do not. I mean, I used to study my body and pick out things that needed to be fixed. And because I spent a number of years in the culture of cosmetic procedures, mostly on my face, but I did start to go at my body a little bit toward the end of my 15 years of engagement in that world. And so I found myself back then studying all sorts of things, my upper arms, my butt cheeks, like, all the places where they start to kind of, wiggle.
Mhm.
I'm also in my early 50s. So, I don't do that anymore, actually. So I don't look in the mirror for any kind of evaluation or valuation.
I love that. You don't look in the mirror for any sort of evaluation. And especially the valuation of what your worth is based on your size. And I mean, I remember I used to practice yoga in short shorts because
Mhm.
I would, when I was younger, I'd go to some of the classes that were heated. And I remember practicing at home one time, and I was in a downward facing dog and I was looking at my thighs
Uh-huh.
and I saw one little dimple. I had never seen a dimple in my thighs before. I know there's people out there that probably hate me for saying that, but it was the first time I had ever seen a sign of cellulite coming onto my thighs, and I was super fit. And it just, I still remember that. I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, like, what am I doing wrong? And that's the time also. And I don't feel as if I had body dysmorphia or that I was really judgmental of my body. But now when I look back, I was also, though, had my grandmother's sewing tape measure.
Mhm. Yep.
And I would take that and I would wrap it around my thighs. And I would see as a measure of my progress when at the gym. I'd measure
Yeah.
my waist, my hips, my thighs. And I was just like, wait, now I step back. Had a little notebook that I would look at.
Oh, you kept track.
I kept
Mhm.
track. And
Yep.
I wouldn't necessarily beat myself up, but I wasn't actually seeing what I was doing either at that time. And I think that's how ingrained some of these beliefs are in us that, oh, this is just normal. It's no big deal. I'm not doing any harm to myself.
Well, exactly. And so one of the things that I stopped doing is applying any kind of metric to my body. So I don't weigh my body anymore. There is no function of that in my life. It has no purpose. And so I don't weigh it. I don't pay any attention to my clothing size. I don't measure it. I don't do any of that. And I used to do a ton of it. Yeah. Uh,
And that
so
in itself sounds extremely freeing.
it's wonderful. It is wonderful because, part of what happens here is it's beyond just the really rejection of your body, which is truly your partner in this life, like truly becoming one with your body and being friendly to it and supportive to it and compassionate to it and giving it what it needs and not trying to control it and make it look a certain way. It really brings you back to yourself, to perhaps, not all of us have this, but perhaps there's an early memory that you can access where you didn't have this self-consciousness, this idea that your body had to be a certain way or that your value was directly tied to it. And so I at least have a glimmer of some memories of that time. And I wanted that back, damn it. And so I was on a mission to take it.
Thank you for sharing that. And, and hearing you talk, you said so many things right out of the gate. And there's this idea, like you brought forward the article that you read about New York Fashion Week. And, and I had read an article a couple days ago around how women have the purchasing power. Like women in the United States are responsible for 70, 80%
Yes.
of all the household. So like they're not just buying for themselves, but they're buying for their children and their families. And so if we think about the power that we have, if we decide that to take control of that purchasing power and start to put it towards the things that we really truly value as women,
Yes. Yes.
and take that back, it could be incredible. It could, and then because I'm always fascinated, like who is the one that's making the decisions about what size is the size of the year?
Yep.
Like who is making that decision, and why are we following that? This invisible voice.
Yeah. We're conditioned.
Yeah.
We're conditioned to believe it's true. And we vote with our dollar, and we can reject it. We can reject it and stop feeding it, at least feeding it our money. So we can work on how to reject it in a way that it doesn't even really get in there anymore. We see the falsehood, the fraud of it.
Yeah. And how much money would that free up for ourselves and our families, and also give us that power? Because, in this country, especially, that really is the driving force of change, is who's holding the money, who's holding, unfortunately, but that really is the case in politics and pretty much every aspect of our culture. And so women, if we're 70 to 80, like we are the majority. We are the majority. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that when we come back. We're already up to our first break of the show. And if you are anywhere or you want to come to this beautiful location in Rangeley, Maine, I'm going to be there for the Her Festival on May 4th through the 8th. Now, this is a wild, inviting mountain forest retreat. And this is where you're going to get restored, replenished, and renewed. It's all for women, run by women. And actually, all but one of these women have been on Women Thriving Unapologetically. So they're incredible. So you get to come and celebrate what it means to be a woman in this wild and beautiful location. So that's May 4th through 8th. And I'll put the link in the show notes if you're watching or you're watching the replay, but that's www.her-festival.com. And we'll be right back after this show. Not after the show. I keep saying that.
All right, we are all clear. I'll edit that little last part.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I did that last week too. I mean,
It's okay.
Yeah. I kind of laugh.
Matter.
I laugh at myself.
I know I had a little math issue. Like I did a show last week, and I was like, I think that's 25 years. I don't know. I think that math is wrong. Like I was focused and doing my show, and I couldn't figure out the math of something. Who cares?
Yeah. I did that in the
Nobody.
workshop this weekend. I totally watched some dates, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's what's the message that's important.
Exactly.
So I'd like to dive in also to how we're anesthetizing ourselves and why we're doing that, and to get into that. I'm trying to feel into the really good segue back in. And
I could talk just very briefly about the opportunity cost of, if that is what is in our mind, we're not like what we could be contributing that is uniquely ours to contribute is that space is taken up. And then I could kind of get into how food was anesthesia for me, perhaps.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more of your story. It's so powerful. And
Okay.
I think it would be really beautiful to bring that in, because people
Okay.
a lot of women, I think, can relate to it and be inspired by it. Sounds good. Just take it in.
All right, 25 seconds.
Empowerment.com. You are listening to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Have a question for Lynsie or her guests? Want to share your story? Email Lynsie at thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. That's thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Here again is Lynsie.
Welcome back to Women Thriving Unapologetically. We're having an incredible conversation with Kirsten Johansen about how our size and our weight are not the problem, and how women really have been conditioned to believe that their value is tied to the way that their body looks. And if we take that power back, we unravel those knots and those tightly wound knots and beliefs, that we can actually start to regain a lot of our power. And a lot of that power can come through our purchasing power or through having more energy to focus on things that are more important in our lives. So welcome back. And Kirsten, let's dive into this.
Yes. So we were just chatting a little bit about just the opportunity cost, because if we are worried about our bodies and thinking about our bodies and what's wrong with our bodies, it's hard to do multiple things at the same time. And we have amazing brains and minds and things, but it's hard to do two things at once. And so, that if that's going on in your brain, because it went on in my brain for all those years that I talked about, I would be working, for instance, and let's say, it's a period of time where my weight was the size of my body was up. And all day long, I'm working and I'm working at a treatment center and I'm running a treatment center and, doing meaningful work. And all day long, what I heard in my head is, you're too fat, you're too fat, you're too fat, you're too fat. Constantly aware of how something fit, or whether it was pinching, or like you talked about before, is this fitting like it used to fit? And it just was a constant gnawing, not just distraction, but it just tore me down inside. And that is, part of the anesthesia of food. And so for me, I had a relatively harmonious relationship with food for the first 10-ish years of my life. I was pretty compelled by sugar, though. So, if I had access to sugar that was unregulated, like my mom and I, when we would go shopping, my dad would say, well, don't forget to bring me a surprise, which really meant go to the candy counter, which I think at the time was at Sears. It still was the old timey Sears. And I had a candy counter with the red and white striped bags, and he loved peanut clusters. And so we would go shopping, and then we would always go to the candy counter and get my dad his peanut clusters, and I would get my malt balls. And so we would come home, and my mom would always say the same thing to me. She'd say, okay, don't make yourself sick. To which I would then go off to my room and proceed to make myself sick. Which was the only way that I knew to stop eating the sugar. So relatively friendly relationship with food, but sugar was quite compelling. And then we moved to a new house, a bigger house, and I started to walk home from school by myself. And so that was roughly fourth grade-ish, I want to say. And I was a little bit young I was like a year younger than everybody else. I was a little bit younger than my grade would suggest. And I just found that I came home to being scared and lonely. And of course, I did not disclose that. I was a little soldier. So I just soldiered through and didn't show any real vulnerability. And I began to eat. And boy, did I eat. And I managed to take food from a variety of different places so that you couldn't really tell, like there wasn't a massive dent in the ding dongs. Because I would take a ding dong and a Twinkie and a Suzy Q and a cupcake and some Fritos and some potato chips. So, I started to binge to manage my fear and my loneliness. So my relationship with food became anesthesia at around 10.
Wow. And so where did you know where the fear was coming from? Was it just the fear of being alone?
Great question. I would say no, except to say there was a presence in that house. And I never mentioned it to anyone. And only in the last, I think, couple of years, I mentioned it to my brother. And he said, "Oh, I know. I felt it the whole time. I felt it. And I felt it when we went and looked at the house before we bought it."
I just
He
got
and I,
goosebumps.
yeah, he and I never spoke about that ever. So that was like kind of like, wow, eye-opening to me that he also felt something. And so because that was also the first time that I was really by myself, as a kid, because you're young. And so you're just not, I played my room by myself, but in terms of being in a house by myself, this was the first time for that. It was also a new house, a larger house, and a house that there was what felt like a malevolent presence, not a friendly presence. And so I sort of hunkered down in front of the TV, which also throughout my life has been a form of anesthesia, and literally wore a groove in the carpet where my body sat and laid, where I just turned on the TV and ate and watched TV and ate until just prior to everyone else coming home, at which point I would hide the evidence of anything that I had been doing and go up to my room and act as if everything was fine. And then I would be called down to dinner after I had put so much food in my body that I was about to burst, but I couldn't disclose that in any way. So then I would go downstairs and dutifully eat my dinner and clean my plate. So in terms of developing basically a separation between what my body really would have wanted or needed or would have felt nourishing or supportive to it, it really just became about killing the suffering.
Wow. And I'm just thinking about that little girl that is just so scared, and she doesn't
Yeah.
have the tools doesn't know, like, you're sensing something, but your cognitive ability isn't quite developed yet. You can't put words to it. And you say you're doing the best that you can. Like, your solution was to anesthetize yourself and just to stay in that little spot, and which probably felt safe to you, just to have the food there, the TV there, your well-worn groove.
Yep.
And
The
so
bubble.
the bubble. So every time you came there, especially if nothing happened in that moment, that was your place to keep going, your place of safety. And I can imagine how those habits just created that sense of safety later on in your life. Like
That, and it was so shameful. So at the same time that you're reaching for this form of anesthesia, I was also just really ashamed of what I was doing. I mean, it's something when you're doing something that you would never want anybody else to see, those kinds of things. I later in life would ask myself, well, what's going on with this behavior if I don't want anybody else to see it, and if it's really rooted in shame. So yes, comforting, anesthetic, and shameful, which, I talk a lot about anesthesia behaviors because they usually cause additional suffering. So we use them to address one thing, and then they end up causing other things, which is why the size of your body is not the problem. It's, first of all, not a problem at all. That's A. But it's an effect. It's not a cause. Sure, maybe, if you are too maybe far underweight, there can be issues with that. I mean, like immune system issues and so forth. If your body is carrying quite a bit of additional weight, there can absolutely be issues that are created as a result of that. But those issues are not cause, they're effect. The size of your body is not cause, it's effect. Your eating behavior even is not really the problem. It is causing you probably shame, and it also might be causing you issues with your body that are uncomfortable. But it is an anesthesia behavior. It is not the cause. There is something underneath of it that is creating suffering, that is then compelling you to want to soothe that suffering, of course. Of course.
Yeah. And I think about that because for myself, there's times that I feel such amount of stress from growing my business and doing all the things that there are some times when my partner leaves the house. I'm like, oh, thank God. So I love her dearly, but in that moment, and she's listening to this, so she's gonna be knowing what I'm doing now.
Oh.
The big reveal.
Uh-huh.
No, but sometimes it just gets to be too much. And I've had this behavior my whole life is when it becomes too much, I do anesthetize myself. I sit on the couch, I put the TV on, and I just start eating crap food.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
and it's just because I can't handle the level. Well, I won't say I can't handle the level of stress. I'm not sure how to handle that level of stress in that moment. And I
Mhm.
just need to put myself in that bubble because it just feels like too much. And then
Mhm.
what do I feel like when I'm done doing that? Like, oh, like let's hurry up and pack everything, like hide the evidence before she gets home. And the same similar to what you're saying. And then the shame.
Yep.
And it's not like I'm not doing major binging like I used to do when I was younger, because I'm aware that I could do that and not see the effects on my body. Now I can really
Mhm.
feel it. And there is that level of shame, like why, but also a sense of relief in that
Yes.
moment. So
Well, yeah.
all these parts are coming in, and it's really confusing, and like
Mhm.
you feel like you have all of these different aspects talking at once in your head.
Yes, and when you say crap food, I don't know what that is for you, but I do want to mention that although food is not usually, it's really not the problem. It is possible that you are putting food in that's not for you. So for me, food that creates craving, I don't put in anymore, because no matter how much self-love I have, and no matter how much work I've done, and how self-accepting I am, if I put something in that has a chemical reaction in my body that creates craving, that there's nothing that is any match for that. There's no match for that. So I don't put that stuff in at all. That is what I choose, because I want to do what is for me. I don't profess to know what is right for anyone else, but I don't put sugar in, and I haven't since 2005. And so that's 18 years. I have not put sugar in my body. I have not put grain in any form in my body. Now, I also have alcoholism, which I developed early in my life. And what alcohol is made of is typically grain and sugar. And so when I started to drink early in life, I fell headfirst into alcoholism very quickly. So I've been shown, and then of course I was in the food until I was 35, until I found a recovery program. In the last 10 years of that, from 25 to 35, I was bulimic. So I spent those 10 years with my head in the toilet, probably every day, I would say. And so, yeah, I'm very careful about the chemical reactions of my body to food. And so now if I put something in and I have a reaction to it, my gut reacts or something in my body happens, I'm very attuned to that. And because I do accept myself and love myself, and I accept my body and know how important it is to my life, I don't want to do that to it. So in terms of like where I have found the most solace, it has been in unconditional self-acceptance, which means of my body as well.
Mm. And I have to say that I'm definitely not to that level of unconditional self-acceptance. And it's something I'm working with. I'm not even sure if I like the word working with, because that just feels, like
Mm-hmm.
more work.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
but it's something that I'm developing more and more awareness around, because there is this sense of longing for freedom and to be in this really, and I've had moments of that where I just feel like, oh, like I feel so much love for myself, but it tends to be fleeting as the stress becomes greater. And
Mm-hmm.
so my stress response is the food. And when I say a crap food, it's like, yeah, sometimes there's sugar or things like that, but it's just overeating in general. Like
I
I
see.
don't I have a difficulty reining it in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so,
I had that my whole life almost. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, so it could be like, I could have a huge salad, but I put so much stuff on there and I'll eat it all. And then I'll go back for
Mm-hmm.
something else
Mm-hmm.
and then something else. And then I feel so overfull, and maybe, and I've been working with this for myself. Maybe it's because I don't feel full in the other areas of my life. And I'm trying to compensate for it in that moment, just so one, I can anesthetize the stress, but also feel some sense of fullness the way that my
Mm-hmm.
body understands it, even if I'm not, and it doesn't replace the fullness that I'm seeking at a deeper level. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I don't know if this is the case for you, but for me, it was also a bit of a punishment because I didn't accept myself, and I was very perfectionistic and very critical and very hard on myself on the inside. And so sometimes I would kind of punish myself in a way that would bring the discomfort and the pain and the suffering to a place where I could sort of get my mind and my hands around it. And so if I'd overeaten, if I just really pushed my body to the limit with the food, it sort of takes whatever the original source of suffering was, and it sort of it's a distraction, right? Because it sends it over to, now I'm thinking about what I ate, and I'm thinking about how uncomfortable I am, and I'm thinking about, why do I do this, and I feel shame. And so we've missed the opportunity to wonder, what is making my stress go up right now? What is causing me to suffer? What inside of me needs compassion? We sort of miss that opportunity because we go directly to the anesthesia.
Yeah. And I can so relate to the feeling of punishment. And sometimes I'm not fully aware of it. Oftentimes the punishment comes after that, because then then I don't feel so good about,
Exactly.
yeah. So
Yep.
we're up to our second break of the show. So definitely stay tuned. We're talking with Kirsten Johansen. And during the break, if go to the Her Festival, which is www.her-festival.com, and check it out, because it's an amazing festival led by 6 incredible women, 5 of which have been on Women Thriving Unapologetically show. And they're going to be leading us, because I'm going to be there too, through incredible practices and just really uniting in sacred circle, just all women diving in and really getting nourished and fed at a deep level, which I believe we all need. And that's why I'm going. So we'll be right back after this short break.
All right, great segment. All clear. Back in about 90.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk at all in the last segment about the realities of how we're treated when our bodies, because I've experienced that, and I can really talk about kind of the fluctuation in my body to give people an idea of what we're talking about, because it's about 85 pounds. It's 85 pounds. So
Wow.
I've experienced the world as a thin person and as a heavy person, and got treated very differently.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And I'd also, and just some of the steps that women can take to start to really get the support that they need, because it's not easy.
No,
it's not easy.
This is insidious. Food is, I think, one of the most insidious anesthesias that we all interact with. It crosses. I mentioned on my show, I was practicing my Turkish, And as I get further into the language, the phrases and sentences begin to reflect the culture. And there was I was learning some new vocabulary, and there was a phrase that was eating and drinking in order to forget. And I just thought, this crosses all cultures, all languages, all genders, all everything. This relationship that we struggle with food, most of us.
Coming back in 10.
Okay.
You are listening to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Have a question for Lynsie or her guests? Want to share your story? Email Lynsie at thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. That's thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Here again is Lynsie.
Welcome back to Women Thriving Unapologetically. And during the break, Kirsten and I were talking about, well, she was sharing with me because she's living in Malta now. Like, I wish we would have had time to talk about this amazing journey that you've taken to courageously step into your heart's guidance and move to Malta. And you're practicing some of your Turkish, and you came across this phrase that translates to drinking and eating to forget, and how this really just translates across all genders, all cultures, and how all of us have done this at some point in our lives, and that you have experienced the extreme of that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the reality of that and how your experiences being on both ends of the spectrum of being extremely thin and overweight. So
Yes. Yes. So just to give everybody an idea of the delta between the low and the high, it was about 85 pounds. So, in my food recovery program, there was a phrase that people would use where they would say, I come from big numbers, or I don't come from big numbers, which usually meant 200, 300, 400 pounds. And so while I don't, quote, come from big numbers, I've experienced the world as a woman who, kind of meets the ideal in some way. And then I've experienced the world as a woman who does not. And I was treated badly, really badly, when I did not meet the standard. So I want to say that clearly, because that is a reality that we are discriminated against based upon the size of our bodies. That is the truth about the current world that we live in, or the society that we live in, particularly in the US. And I was mistreated not only by my husband, who said things to me like, you're not the woman I married. I'm no longer attracted to you. You're fat and you're unattractive. So I was married to somebody who literally removed his love from me when I gained weight, and said there was years of cruelty around that. So that was life-changing, to have somebody who I thought would, was supposed to love the actual me, not do that. It wasn't about me, but that doesn't mean that it didn't devastate me, because at the time I thought it was about me. And I was treated horribly by strangers. Like I would be out jogging, trying to, which I hated, by the way. I did all sorts of things that I hated to try to control my body. But I remember being out jogging, and I'm more of a long distance person. I'm not a sprinter. I'm not very fast, which is fine by me. But I'm poking along, and these guys are out playing golf. And so I think there were 3 of them, and they were off in the distance, like out on the golf course, and I'm jogging along the path. And he literally, one of them, they stop what they're doing, and he takes it upon himself to yell at me across the golf course and out onto the street that I need to run faster. And I didn't do my second lap that day. I'm sure I probably went home and ate. So yeah, the reality is that you will be treated a certain way. You will be treated like you have value. If you are a certain type of thin, or whatever the current standard is. And then you will be treated either like you're invisible, or that you're a violation. Like I remember feeling like this idea, and also it was conveyed to me pretty clearly, like, what a shame, because if you just weren't so fat, then you would be an attractive woman. And what I want to say about that is we can reject that. We can reject that. It is bullshit, made up, untruth, patriarchy crap. And in order for real change to occur, not just around us and for the way we are treated to change, we really do have to work toward true self-acceptance, because that is what allows you to reject these messages and standards that really have no meaning unless we believe them.
They have no meaning unless we adhere meaning to them. Yeah.
Correct.
And we can reject that. And that's absolutely true. And that's why I so wanted to have you on this show, to reinforce this for women and to share with them some of the steps, because there's so many different modalities out there. And I've tried a lot of different things on my healing journey, and it's never one thing, but it can be
Right.
one thing that leads to another thing. So I'd
Yes.
love to hear, what are the things that you brought in to help you find that self-acceptance?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the first thing was truly the self-acceptance work. And one of the things I want to say about bodies and size of bodies and food, as someone who tried so many different things to address my food as a way to then control the size of my body, I've found it incredibly important to uncouple, to divorce those two things. Because in order to truly mindfully eat, which I used to not think was possible, I am here to tell you it is actually possible. In order to truly mindfully eat and nourish your body and stop at a point of satiation and not, push through that to that point of sort of over fullness, you do need to have a certain, at least the beginnings of a practice of unconditional positive regard for yourself and your body. So that's been incredibly, incredibly important to uncouple. I know it's hard. It's super, super hard to uncouple your food and the way that you nourish yourself from the appearance of your body.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of so many different situations that I've been in. I'll go to a party and, okay, I don't know anyone. I feel uncomfortable. So then what do? I either, back in the day, I would, either grab a drink, or I would just hang out by the food table because that gave me something to do. And I was having difficulty uncoupling, my
Yes.
discomfort from the food. And I still have difficulty with that. And, I practice self-compassion, which is, I feel like, is a little bit different than unconditional self-regard.
Self-acceptance or
And
self-regard.
Yeah. Can you speak to what is the difference between the two? And then how do you create this unconditional acceptance?
Yes. Well, so what I find the difference to be is that I'm not trying to oppose these negative voices with a positive voice. Like, I'm not in the fight anymore. I really undertook the work in a way that I wanted out. I wanted out of this cycle. And so it's a neutral position, more so. So it's not this, I'm the most awesome, I'm the most pretty, I'm the most smart. It's truly not that, because that's sort of the other end of the self-hating continuum. Instead, I simply accept myself exactly as I am in the moment without putting any conditions on it. It's not, well, you'll be acceptable when, or if you get to that size, or if you look, I just cleared all of that away because I realized it's lies. It's lies. It's lies. So that was incredibly important. And then the other piece of it is when I began to be able to truly mindfully eat, and I let go of my dysmorphia for the most part. That was another journey. And I transitioned out of my food recovery program, which is a whole other story. It was wonderful and super helpful. And then it became not for me anymore because I had done the self-love work. And so the structure of my food recovery program actually no longer worked for me. I needed a more natural focus where I was centered. I was truly centered and my body was truly centered. And I really just asked myself a couple of questions. Am I hungry? Am I hungry? If I'm not physically hungry, even if I'm feeling a little bit of a pull to put something in, I just move on to another thing. I just ignore it because I'm like, oh, I'm not hungry. And then if the answer is yes, I am hungry, because I really do care about myself. And so I don't struggle with whether to choose something nutritious or not nutritious. Most of my food is nutritious. I just think, well, what have I eaten today? And, how much fruit and how much protein and how much veg and how much fat and what could my body use to support it? And then I choose that, and everything I choose is delicious to me.
And I love how you're just checking in. It's constantly checking in and honoring your body. Like, am I hungry? And what am I hungry for?
Yes.
What am I really hungry for?
Yep.
And then and being aware of what the body might need nutritionally so that it can be truly fed and nourished. So I can't believe we're at the end of the show. We can only have a moment. I know.
And just real quick. So when you feel that weird tension, that pull, that inexplicable, I don't know what it is, but I can't stand it and I want to make it go away. That is your opportunity. That is your opportunity to have a conversation with yourself about what might be going on with you. And even if you go ahead and eat, that is okay. That is okay. Because if you pause and you ask yourself that question, that in and itself is going to help you to develop a practice where you listen to yourself and you honor yourself.
And then you take that power back. You have your power of choice in that moment, which I love. And so we have the power of choice to choose what we're buying into, what we're using our purchasing power for. We have the power to really check in with our bodies and honor it. And it may not feel easy, but the process is so worthwhile because you will find that freedom. And so if you want to find some freedom from this, definitely reach out to Kirsten. Her online home is www.giraffetangooctopus.com, which is a great name. It's easy to remember, giraffetangooctopus.com, and definitely reach out to her because she is an incredible force to help you move through these challenges, and not just because of what she has written on, all the certifications and all that she has, but from her direct knowledge from her experience in her life. And so she's a powerful woman. Is there any one last word or bit that you would want to share when we have 15 seconds left?
Just that you can exit that voice. You can exit it. You can be free of it. It's possible.
Voice. Yeah.
Yep. You can exit it.
Ladies, you can exit that voice. It is possible. So thank you so much for listening. You've been here with us on Women Thriving Unapologetically, and we'll be here next week. And I'll be doing a solo show again. So I'm a little nervous about that one, on the steps to thriving. So thank you so much. Many blessings and much love to each and every one of you.
All right. Awesome job today. Good show. All clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, the last one was really strong. It felt really good. And there's so much.
Great.
My God, you have so much to offer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
This is a topic I care very much about.
And it shows and it translates. So I'm glad we chose. I mean, because you have so many things that you can speak on. As you know, when you have a guest on the show, that it really resonates with them. The conversation is so easy. And so thank you so much for sharing.
I
appreciate you having me on. It was super fun.
Yeah. And let me just jump over to the Facebook group and see. Let's see. We got lots of comments here today. Let me jump to the top. Morning. Good morning. This is such an important conversation. Let's see. Me too. I can't get it correct. At 109, I am not healthy and still try one day at a time. Partners have said, you're too skinny or you don't have enough fat. Sorry, but just sharing.
Yes. So I have recently had a bit of a trauma response, and that is I spent a couple of years alone during the pandemic, and it ended up making it difficult for me to eat because I never shared a meal with anybody, and the isolation started to make me ill in a way, and I just started to not have any appetite and so forth. And I was able to address that and work through it. And then I came here to Malta. I go back and forth between the U.S. and Malta. And when I'm here, my partner, he does restaurant management, and so there are periods of time when I'm here where he works a lot. And so I came back here just about a month ago, and as his work ramped up, the more I was alone, I started to experience something similar. And he saw it. He saw it on me. So I just want to speak directly to the person who put that in there, because there's this idea that if you're, quote, too thin, that it's a nice problem to have. It's really not. It's not a nice problem to have. There's a Finnish proverb I love, and it's happiness is the place between too little and too much. And so my partner grabbed my hip bone, which when I shrink can cut you. That's kind of just the way my body, this is just not where I carry anything anyway. I carry it elsewhere, but I'm not there. And he said, Ashkim, I think you lose 2-3 kilo. It's too much. You must eat, which was in no way, it didn't hurt me in any way. He just was noticing. And he was encouraging, and he brings home kebab for me so that I have meat, and lamb shank and stuff. So I have meat. And so sometimes we swing the other direction. And this idea that we only get feedback about our bodies when we're, quote, too big, or what somebody determines as too big. We also get that feedback when somebody else determines that we're, quote, too skinny. And so it really is about your relationship with your body, and how your body needs to be nourished so that it can support you and carry you through this life. I know that's so difficult to hive that off and separate it from all these messages that we get either from the media or from other people in our lives. But that is where the secret sauce is, truly. It lies with us.
Yeah. It's your body. Nourish it and love it. Kind of reminds me, and at the beginning of the show, I was talking about how, like, when we did the drop in, that it's your best friend and it's with you. And that was a meditation that it's a bigger meditation that was gifted to me from a teacher early on in my yoga practice. And it stuck with me because there's so many times that I'm not very nice to my best friend. And I'm like, well, she's been with me through everything. She has the memory somewhere in her body of everything. And so I just keep coming back to that. Am I nourishing myself? Am I listening to her? Am I listening to the patriarchy or people that have said things to me in the past? And and Carolyn here says that, she's been conditioned since birth. And I mean, we all have. And it's like, how can we just recondition ourselves and reclaim that our own power? And then we have someone that shares shifting our thoughts shifts our cellular makeup and shifts our chemistry. Even in just the pause, we are powerful creatures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things I sometimes recommend, if you find that you have that voice that says mean things to you about your body, it's not coming from you. That is a conditioned, I call it self-hate, but that sometimes doesn't resonate with everybody. That's what resonates with me. It's an interloper. It is a conditioning that is coming in to trash talk you. It's not you. And that's why you can show at the door. you have to keep showing at the door. But over time, as you continue to shoo it away and call BS on it, it will kind of give up. It kind of gives up and says, okay, well, I guess she's not going to listen to me anymore. And also, so take the things that you say to yourself, and now think about somebody you really, really love and try to say those things to that person.
Yeah.
You probably aren't going to be able to do it. And if you think about that, it will give you an idea of how much or maybe how little love and compassion you are applying to yourself. Because, like, let's say you have a child. Let's just take a child, and you love that child, and that child goes to school and comes home and says, Johnny called me fat today, and they are crestfallen and in shock because they've not ever considered that they could possibly be fat. I would guess that most parents would probably hug that child, would hug and comfort and say, that is not true. You are wonderful. You are valuable. You are loved. That is what we need. And we primarily need it from ourselves because it's been conditioned out of us.
Yeah. And all those parts that are feeling, all those parts that we have are most often younger parts that do need that love and that compassion.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story and all your wisdom. And I do hope that you'll come back on the show and we can dive in, maybe even and peel back some more layers to this important topic.
I would love to.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much. And I'm just going to, what I'll do real quick is I'm just going to end our live stream. Bye, everyone. And if you have questions for Kirsten that show up later, you can actually put them in the comments below, and maybe Kirsten can come in and answer those, or I can direct them to you so you can answer those questions. So we'll be back here next week.